Yash. How are you today?
Hi Kshitij, I'm good. You tell me, how are you?
I'm doing well as well. So, guys, Yash and I have come out with this initiative called the Undergrads, where it is a forum where the two of us try to understand and break down contemporary issues as well as policies that come into picture to the best way possible in the idea of a college student. So today we would be discussing the national education policy that has been put forth by our government. Yash, would you like to tell us something about the national education policy?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, since we've already established the fact that the topic for the conversation is the new national education policy, there has been too much debate on this structural change that the policy comes up with, and there's too much discussion on the way the higher education sector has been changed from 10 plus 2 to now 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, or how there are changes at the university level and everything. But before directly breaking down the policy, I would really like for us to understand some basic points. Now, it's very important for us to understand that in the coming decades, India will have the highest youth population in the world. And it's a shared responsibility on the government to provide contemporary educational opportunities to the youth and the students of this nation, which will definitely improve the future and everything regarding the country. Now, how can this be done? This could be only done if the education policy or the proposed policy targets the universal access to the quality education. Now, this could include everything apart from the basic content that we have right now, and this will be a key through which we can promote social justice or scientific advancement, national integration, cultural preservation, and many more. Now, we have observed that how our workforce, either skilled or unskilled, they have been through the manual stage. They have certainly moved on to the computerization of the stages. And now we are moving one more step further, which is the artificial intelligence. The requirement and the demand of unskilled laborers or workers has become minimal, will become minimal in future, and the demand for skilled laborers will increase with the knowledge which will require the knowledge of data science, computer science, and mathematics. And this is the reason, just apart from content, critical analysis is something which will also come into picture. And if you look to the if you look to the thirst of the policy, you'll come to know that now the idea is not just about content reading or just reading about the marks or results. It's more regarding the critical analysis. And it's not no more stick just to learn content. It's all about how to learn, right? And they have also added some vocational subject, which is like, if you see in this society at present time, there is this hierarchy out of which we define the jobs. Like, these are the jobs which are upper level, these are the jobs which people are not really interested in. That covers the vocational part and everything. So somehow the vision is very clear of the policy, which is the holistic development of a student, right? Now, one of the more important things that the policy also targets is the teaching level in the teacher. And I believe that no education policy could do justice to the country if the teachers and the teaching conditions which are at present is not amended or maybe improved in a way. If we take this in that way. Now, to be honest, the present practical scenario is very simple, that students are really into studying because of the marks or the maximum they could score. Now, it's very important to change the attitude from the teacher's perspective, where they start teaching students not just of the content, but trying to have an interactive session, the discussion session, to develop a critical analysis in the students. And this is something for which the policy also recommends many training programs and everything. Even if you talk about the Anganwadi systems, which is there for the rural areas, and how we know that the education is not reaching the rural areas. So even there, they have mentioned the qualification of the teachers and everything, how it should be improved and everything. And apart from that, if you'll go back down to the principles of the policy, you'll find some very basic concepts such as flexibility, or there is no hard separation between arts and science, or curriculum or non-curriculum exercises. So they are not going into that specifics, or how it is multidisciplinary. So maybe it's a broad view, and definitely it will help in the holistic development of the student. So maybe, yeah, this is.
So those are a lot of points and compelling points that came out over there. Yeah, with that, you also mentioned the Anganwadi system. And considering the Anganwadi system is a basic uh, part of education where a lot of children actually get introduced to formal education. Uh, what do you think about the current Anganwadi system, Yash?
Okay.
That
Yeah.
the policy has proposed in that, sorry, that the government has proposed in the
Right.
policy.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's a very important point to address, because when we talk about education, it's very important to practically understand that the education is not reaching to each and every house of this country. It's not reaching to the rural areas. Now there comes the important role of the Anganwadi system. Now they have specifically mentioned the structure and the architecture of the Anganwadi system. They have improved that. They have also mentioned the qualification of the teacher. So now they are taking proper attention, that it's not just because it's an Anganwadi, you can just go and be a teacher just because you need an employment. No, now there is some basic qualification, and if you don't have that qualification, it's all right. The policy proposes a method by which you can achieve that qualification. Also, so the idea comes from the very first bracket of the policy, that is the elementary education. And how, so earlier the method was, as I have also mentioned, the 10+2 was the method where it's even going now, and the idea is very simple. You just score marks the maximum you can by reading and everything. But the 5+3+3+4, now the Anganwadi system presents itself in the first bracket, that is the first 5 years of your education, which basically starts from when a child is of 3 years of age. Now there they've removed all the exams for the first bracket. The idea is to make the environment very friendly. So children, now if you see the data which have been present in the policy, there are many dropouts. The children are not really interested in going to school. They're afraid of exams. They're afraid of the formal uh, education that they're getting. So it's very important for them from the very inception that they pretty much are very friendly to the environment. So this is the reason they have removed exam. There is no formal education. The approach is more based on activity discussed, interactive sessions, playing with numbers, alphabets, etc. So the children are really interested. Now the children will, like, from themselves, they'll try to go to school, and they won't leave school or ask for holidays and everything. Now this is something which is a step forward for, again, the critical analysis. However, it's been also mentioned in the policy that 85% of the cumulative brain of a child develops in that stage, and this is the reason it's very important that the first impression of the school should be very friendly and not something that the child does not want to go. And as mentioned of the Anganwadi system, I've already mentioned it. What do you think on the Anganwadi system, the changes in the system?
So, firstly, you brought out the point of not having exams in the Anganwadi system or in the first 5 years of a child's education, that is between the age of 3 and 8.
Right.
So, the reason I believe that is why the reason that is there, it's not to create a low pressure environment or a no pressure environment, rather that the stimulus that the children have towards exams at this particular stage is not as effective as it is in the later stages. So, for a child who's of 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I don't see I don't see, the child won't see what is the point of an exam or what is the gravity an exam holds. And he doesn't learn through the exam. If you make a child sit and be like A, B, C, D from a textbook, this is A, this is B, this is C, it doesn't stick to his head. And that's why when you see, even in the most elementary level, they say A for apple, B for ball. So the child can relate to a particular subject and then learn the alphabet, because it is at that stage that children relate to things and learn from practical experiences and learn from other sort of experiences that they come across. And that's exactly why, as you pointed out, that the government has brought out play oriented, games oriented, puzzles oriented, that aspect of it. Further, you also mentioned that AI is coming into this particular phase. And right now, if we have AI in our structure, and our job as human beings is just simply to put data from one point to another, it makes us redundant to be on earth, because we do not have a role, because AI is going to play that role, and it will do that role much, much, much more efficient than we are. So it is important to keep that aspect also in mind. Further, uh, the thing is, the policy also talks about the Anganwadi system's architectural structure. So the architectural structure here, it very clearly mentions that there should be open spaces, there should be ventilation, there should be arcs, there should be light colors. So as you mentioned, it is to create a sense of positivity and a sense of belongingness to a particular school. So that is something which is very important to build in a child at a very young stage, because as you know, children always fear going to school. When you say school, they start crying, and some parents even say, if you don't listen to me, I'll send you to school.
Right.
So that's what it is. So it's a sense of that kind of fear does exist when it comes to school. So that kind of fear should not be there. And as you said, students should be encouraged to go to school, and they should be pushed to go to school in a sense that it should come from themselves, not from us or not from the parents. So that is something that has to be addressed. Now, with respect to the training of teachers, it is a very big step that the government has uh, taken an initiative to put uh, qualifications in this particular stage, because I understand that qualifications for teaching students or children of this age is very important, because they're very impressionable at this age. So whatever you tell them is what they believe. So at this stage, if you tell them something is good or bad, that is what is good or bad for the rest of their life, and they will remember it at least in their subconscious mind. So it is very important that there is qualification and there is the right teaching and training that takes place in this particular phase. So when it comes to training of these teachers, it is also, the government has also been very robust when it comes to bringing out the training policy over here. So it does take into consideration, yeah, there are backward places in this country. There are places where development has not reached, and it is far from any sort of education or training center. So the government has provided facilities to undertake these training programs on DTH and satellite programs. And also the government understands that in these backward places, a lot of people have not completed their 10+2 education, which is otherwise compulsory for an Anganwadi to be an Anganwadi teacher.
Right.
So if you have completed your 10+2, the policy states that you need a 6 months training program, after which you can become an Anganwadi teacher. However, in a lot of backward places, rural areas, tribal areas, it is very difficult for these teachers to actually complete their education, and they have no opportunity because the nearest high school or the nearest school is like miles away from where they stay. So in those cases, if you don't have that kind of qualification, the government provides a 1 year training program or a diploma course for the purpose of teaching the Anganwadi teachers to look after children. And this particular policy sees to that they are trained in giving puzzles, giving games, and all of that. And it also focuses on numeracy rather than literacy. Now, you may ask, what is numeracy? Numeracy is understanding a particular problem and critically evaluating it, or the ability to critically evaluate and understand things is called numeracy. So you also know that in the Indian system today, um, the average sixth grader does not know basic multiplication and division in many areas. So the two of us may be shocked, like, oh, is that a reality in our country? But it is the reality in our country. And why is that? Because at the primary stage or at the elementary stage, people are taught to mug up math and not understand math. So if I tell that the only things that math is are the four sums I give you on the board, you mug those up and you remember all of those and you come write the exam. It does not serve the purpose of teaching addition, which in the future gives is a part of everyday life. When you give change, when you anything you do, it actually matters. But when at the same time, if you explain to children, these are two sticks, these are two sticks, if you put them together, they become four sticks. It simplifies everything so much that children actually remember that. And when you do it through games, when you do it through interaction, it is scientifically proven. I'm not saying this, and it's not a baseless theory, that children relate to it and they keep that in mind. So that is something which also comes into picture. And again, as reiterating on the exam part, the policy also gives a buffer period between the elementary part as well as the preparatory part, which is the next stage. So the grade 1 and 2 prepares people for the examination part. And with that, I would like to ask Yash, what are your opinions on the fact that the government now in the policy has moved from a content based evaluation to a critical analysis and a holistic multidisciplinary outlook to grade students? So, what are your opinions on that?
Right, right. So, as I also mentioned while in the introduction, that one of the visions of this policy is very simple, that you have to change the idea of content. Like, you have to reduce the idea of just content, and you have to move towards the holistic development of a child. And this is the reason where critical analysis plays an important role. Now, if you talk about 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, so as we mentioned that in the first bracket, there are no exams, there is no formality, and the idea is just to create a safe space for the student and everything. But as soon as he mentions, and as he goes to the second stage, that is the next 3 years of his education, there is the introduction of basic exams, like very very basic exams, which are still based on interactive session and everything. The idea is to introduce light books and everything, to get a bit formal with the student, to have the idea and everything, to start still studying in the regional language, just to have the continue the safe space and everything. And the whole idea sustains over here is that critical analysis is something which is very important for a student. And as soon as, if you see the brackets of the stages, you'll continue to know that that is something which has been implemented time and again. If you move to one more stage up, that is the middle stage. Now there they are introducing coding and everything. So as I mentioned in the introduction, that the future will demand students, the skilled workforce, which will have the knowledge of data science, computer science, and mathematics. So as soon as they'll move to the next stage, that is the middle stage, they'll have the introduction with the abstract subjects such as mathematics, science. And since they are in a habit of critical analysis, they are a habit in interactive discussions, they won't just, as you mentioned, that how students are just interested in the four sums that they are given. No, now they have to understand what's the importance of that particular mathematical argument in their life. How is it implementing ahead? What's the critically point of that particular argument? And this continues for the next stage, that is and there is also the mention of the national language, and how vocational education is something which is promoted by the government. So as I mentioned, that there is a hierarchical difference between the vocational education and people see the jobs. But now over here, it's not just the marks that you score in exams are getting you marks, no, getting you results. No, the idea is also that the vocational education that you take, someone is interested in poetry, maybe someone is interested in carpentry, someone is interested in art or anything. So everything is taken into care. The idea is to make make a student more adaptive in nature, and again the holistic development comes into picture. So I believe that is something which is very important, and I believe that the way it has been targeted and it has been mentioned in the upcoming stages of the education, it will definitely help the students. What do you think regarding the critical analysis of the students?
Yeah, so firstly, it's national languages which are there that the government is trying to implement in the education system. So there are all the languages mentioned in our constitution schedule
Right.
as national languages. So that is something that I had to mention before. But apart from that, when it comes to the current system that you and I have gone through, or all the previous generations have gone through with respect to education, I'd say it was mainly content based, and there was an unspoken universal postulate which said that if you have the marks, you are a good student. If you don't have the marks, you are not a good student.
Right.
So basically, putting and quantifying everything into numbers is very difficult. So and is actually not very feasible as well, because not everything. You and I are two human beings that we cannot be quantified in terms of numbers. I am not a number and you are not a number. So let me explain this to you with a very simple example. For example, you and I are two students. I am a student who studies 16 hours every day. Even in my free time, I refer to books like R.D. Sharma, R.S. Agarwal, and 16 hours. And I know how to read my textbook from back to front without referring to it. I get about 98% in my 12th grade board exams. Whereas you, on the other hand, have involved yourself in all sorts of clubs, hobbies. You have volunteered in places. You are part of the NCC, NSS. You are in sports teams for both national, state level. But you only are able to score about 75 or 80% in your board exam. So as a person, when I go to university, and as university in the word says that it's a place to understand the universe, I have seen the world only through the books that are in front of me and the texts that are in front of me. But whereas you have experienced the world in all practicality, and you know how to deal with people, you know how to deal with the subject practically, you know how to do all of that. So when it comes to that, I leave the question to the people, like, who is more impactful and who is more contributive to society than when it comes to the two of us. I'm not saying that only studying is bad, but when you pick up skills, when you understand how to do things practically, and you know how to use that. Because today, if I learn trigonometry through my RS Agarwal or RD Sharma, it may not have the same effect of that as that when I refer to the same trigonometry while making a slope for a bridge or for some sort of road when I become a civil engineer. That is an actual difference, and that trigonometry, that is the actual application of trigonometry. And if the education system does not help me apply trigonometry in the same way, I believe it has failed. So that is what it is. Also, a person's character is something very important. And when he's in school, it is more about the interaction. It's again scientifically proven that when you go to school, you do not learn much from school. The formal part of it, the teaching part of it, is not much. It just gives you a direction. What you do at home and how you learn it on your own, that is where you do 90% of your learning. So what is school for? It is basically so that like-minded people come together, interact, exchange their ideas, and a sort of interaction takes place so that you are with your peers and you know how, and you compete with them, at the same time you cooperate with them. So that is something that this system would excessively encourage, considering the fact that it is not only about reading, but it is also about doing other things in school. And it gives equal emphasis to sports, which the previous system did not give. And I believe that if this system does get implemented, that is the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 system gets implemented, we will actually come out with scholars, and we will actually come out with people who have learned something in school rather than simply producing robots who learn in universities, get a degree, and work. So that kind of productivity should be there. And the reason why India lacks in all sorts of educational factors, according to me, would be that we simply see education as a tool to get more income. And we do not exactly deserve that income. When we see our stats compared to other countries, say Sweden, say China, say Thailand, or say even Bhutan for that example, we are a very rote learning based society, and we do not understand what we are trying to do over here. I just finished my I just finished whatever I learned. I finished my social studies just because I wanted to finish it, because I had to pass an exam. That should not be the attitude. And when there's a holistic understanding of that subject, and when there's an earnest interest to learn that subject, that automatically comes into picture. And with that particular point, I would like to ask you, Yash, that with the education policy, the government has decided to not have fixed streams of education from the ninth grade. So students have the freedom of choosing whatever subjects they want from all three of the earlier unspoken streams, that is from science, commerce, and arts or humanities. So students have the choice of choosing subjects from each of the streams over here, or each of the disciplines here. So what are your opinions on that?
Right. So yeah, so as I mentioned during the one of the principles of the policy was flexibility. Now, the major thing, and how they've also maintained the separation of arts and science. They've not they've removed the separation of arts and sciences. Now, this was earlier what was believed was the major subject, and the major abstract subjects were mathematics and science. So a student takes either science, either commerce, or either you take arts in very low possibility. However, that stream separation has been removed. Now, a student can do or select subjects as he wishes to. Also, there is also one more important thing which has been done with respect to the results. Now, there is this scope of self-assessment which has been added to the result. So now it's not only about the exams which you are scoring, the semester, the year-end exams that you score. No, it's about self-assessment. How much are you confident on yourself? How much time does you take to complete a time, or complete a work, or how far is your interactive sessions in your classes and everything? How are your behavior and everything with your friends and everything? Now, it also develops the idea of critical analysis through this, because now the student is not only interested in scoring marks or doing this, but no, he's also doing in analyzing things and everything. And since he has followed a model of 5 plus 3 plus 3, where he has been from the very inception been taught to how analyze things and not just mug it up, it's very important for him. Also, it gives up an opportunity to explore student in different fields. So for example, I'm at present a law student. I always wanted to study selective subjects from all the streams. However, I was stuck because I really wanted to study math, so I had to choose science, maths and physics. And now this is something which is really important for now, that students can select subjects as their own. So I believe this will definitely help them. And there will be no fix or imposition of any stream, and the critical analysis will keep on going. What do you think on this?
So yeah, with respect to that, I believe that if a person is interested in a particular subject, if any person is interested, he or she will excel in that subject because he will do it out of uh, earnest hard work, and he will invest him or herself in the particular subject. So suppose I want to become a pilot, and the mandate for becoming a pilot is that you need to have mathematics as well as physics for becoming a pilot. However, as a person, I am equally interested in history of India and studying history or political science. But in the earlier system, that was not possible. Although you could, in the CBSE system and ICSE system, you could interchange one or two subjects with respect to that, like taking science with economics or science with legal studies. Uh, it was not completely possible to mix all the subjects. So you could a pilot if I took commerce, I could never become a pilot because it would always lack physics, and likewise in humanities as well, even though I may have the opportunity to take maths. So one, I believe that a person would give his best if he has interest in that particular subject. So suppose I take science, I love chemistry and I love maths, but I do not have interest in physics, for example. Obviously, I will lose out on a personal level as well as uh, I will lose out in general on that particular subject because I may not feel very interested. I may not have a grasp over that subject. So I may lose my potential in the process as well. I studied a subject for 2 years that I did not like, and I also lost marks in that particular subject. However, if I have the ability to interchange with my disciplines, for example, take Paul Science, because Paul Science interests me in this particular instance. I would give my best in Paul Science, and I would score well there as well, and I'd score well in my other interest subjects as well, and that would bring out my overall potential, and that would bring out my overall interest. So, in all, you would have a very, very, very robust knowledge about what you want because you like what you're learning. Further, the policy also spoke about cracking entrance exams. So personally, if you ask me, I believe that all coaching centers are a mafia, and being part of a mafia basically gives the idea or the unspoken truth of the country, where it says that if you have the money and you have the resources, you have a better chance of getting into a good college than if you don't have the money and resources. So if a son of a CEO has the ability to pay for the most expensive and the best tutorials in the country, a person who's a son of a laborer may or may not have that kind of facility, despite there being scholarships and all of that. So it would be very unfair on in a country like India where such potential lies in the people that potential is lost. So when it comes to this particular policy, I completely support the government that these entrance exams would not need any coaching center, and they would be completely based on critical analysis. So that basically brings out a very good point and addresses a very good problem in our country, which which is actually plaguing the country today. And this would help tap into the bigger, wider ocean of talent that is there, which is amongst the people who are disadvantaged and cannot afford this particular system. Further, also, if you see in certain subjects, such as the science subjects, it is a little more expensive to pay for these subjects because they also constitute a lab fee. So students in this particular instance may not be able to pay those lab fees, and then, but however, have an interest to learn. And the government is willing to support this as well in the policy because it says the policy very clearly says that it is affordable and it aims at affordable teaching as well. So that is also addressed in the point where coaching centers are concerned, as well as where the subjects are being taught in institutions as well. So that being said, Yash, let us move to the point where we are all met with great contention, and which is in great debate nowadays after the release of this policy. That is the three language policy that is being proposed by the government in this new education system.
Right.
What is your opinion on this?
Right. Yeah, I do agree that there has been so much contention and debate on this topic, that the way the languages have been introduced on the various stages of the education system. That is something which is in question, but I just want to make some things clear with that. So at the first instance, the language has been introduced in the second stage, that is the preparatory stage, where the language will be the regional language. Okay? The idea is very simple. So if you look at the policy, there are many data which shows that there are many dropouts, and even dropouts in the sense even at that age where students are not ready to go to school because they're not very much fluent in English. They're not in various parts of the country. And this is something which is addressed by this. Second thing, since we are making a friendly environment since the very initial stage, it's very important that local language is something which is taken care of. Also, one of the visions of the policy is to preserve cultural preservation, and also to highlight Indian art and culture. And this is not just about the idea of India. Many of the developed countries, they even believe that if you learn and educate the children in the traditional language or the languages that are born of that land, this will help in social, educational, and technological advancement of the country. And similarly, so this is how the first part was covered, which where the regional language, and it was not there has been so much contention that it is being imposed or something, but the reality is that the government has nowhere written that it is something which is mandatory. Okay, even today if the private schools want, or if the schools want that, okay, we still want to stick to English, it's all right. However, the scope for regional language has opened up. So the idea is also that you cannot impose English at the very same time. Now coming to the second stage, that is the middle stage, where the national language comes in picture. Now over here, yes, I agree that the national language and the studying of the national language is compulsory. However, there is no specific mention that you have to impose one language, because in today's political framework, it has been understood that this particular part is a political move, or maybe an imposition of a certain language which has been just spoken by 40% of the population. But it is not the case. You can study any of the national language. If you're interested, you can study Sanskrit. If you're interested, you can study Urdu. If you're interested, you can study also Hindi. You can study Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, anything. So there is no imposition in terms of a particular imposition of a language. There is option, flexibility at the very same time. And coming to the last stage, which is the secondary stage, or the last stage, where there is just an option that if interested, the student might learn a foreign language. Now this is something which is, I believe that it is the base by which you can create a workforce for people who are targeting in future to go in Western countries and learn their language, where the language is something which is very important. So maybe it is, again, it's optional, it's not any imposition. So a student can learn if he's targeting a country of the Western side where he really wants to work over there. And we all know that how it's very important to learn the local languages of particular countries, how they are so much into their language. So these are the three stages and the three language policy. I just don't understand why there is so much contention. However, I would love to know your opinion on this.
So the contention obviously comes from the idea that a language is being imposed on certain people. Though that may be true or not, the idea of imposition is something which is contradictory to a lot of people's cultural identity.
Right.
Also, if we talk about Hindi being a language that people have to learn, we have to understand that 40% of the population does speak Hindi. That is not in that question. That fact is not in question. However, it is also important to understand that 60% of the country does not speak Hindi, or are non-native speakers of Hindi. And given a fairly cautiously optimistic stat, only 10% of those may be comfortable using Hindi. The rest of them have, in many cases, are not comfortable with using Hindi, or have not even heard of a language called Hindi. For example, if you go to interiors of Orissa, or an interior land in Karnataka or Andhra Pradesh, people would not speak Hindi, and they have not been exposed to the language. And suddenly asking the education system to implement such a language would not only be a Gregorian task for the education system of that particular place, because you need to find teachers who are qualified in that particular subject to go into rural areas and teach that subject, but also it would be a Gregorian task on the students to imbibe such knowledge, because this is an alien concept to them, alien language to them, which they've never heard before. And that is why the question of regional language comes into picture, because the regional language is something that they can converse in, and they are kind of comfortable with when it comes to talking. However, India today is faced with a bigger challenge. There is our culture on one hand, whereas there is globalization and integration of the world on the other. And now the problem faced by the Indian education system is that it has to balance between the two, ensuring that people are grounded to their culture, they're aware of their culture, roots, and heritage. At the same time, they are competent enough to compete on the global level with all of the other people on the workforce as well. So they become active members of the world workforce, where it is and there is no brain drain, so they can help India as well. So the thing is, we have to understand that India today is not in a spot where other countries would come to India asking for India's help. It is that India has to sell itself to other countries in order to get some sort of investment for its own development and for its own strength. And for that purpose, I think English is a language that could unite us all. Because and that argument has two particular fronts. A lot of people have been arguing that Hindi should be the language of common instruction, a common medium in India, and some even have gone to argue that Sanskrit should be the language. But we need to understand that one, uh, though Hindi is alien to 60% of the, it is not alien to 40% of the population, it is alien to 60% of the population. Whereas English, if it is alien to me, it is alien to everybody in this country. So that ends the issue that the country has been fighting on, which is against the very fact that we celebrate, that is unity in diversity. The second part is making English a medium of instruction and allowing people to converse in English and learn in English allows us to be part of a world where the de facto language is English. Now, almost every aspect of the world forum is dominated by English. So, English is a language in the United Nations. Any air traffic control that you go, they always converse in English because that is the de facto language that every pilot and every air traffic controller should be aware of. So, that is something where India also has an upper hand over other countries in the world. If you take China, if you take Thailand, if you take Cambodia, they lack one thing that India does have, and that is India's strength as well, which is English. So it's a lot easier to do business in India than those countries because the power of English is very well shown over here. However, the very point of contention with English is that it is becoming a symbol of status in our country. A lot of people see that knowing English is equal to being, say, the king of a particular land, which is not true. Our languages have equal heritage, if anything more. Okay, our languages have developed through thousands of years, whereas English is a lot more recent than all of our languages. We have classical languages in our country. So the question is that we must study these classical languages, at the same time be able to converse with the world and get the world to know that India is a competent country with the best workforce, and to also know that India is doing very well. So with that, Yash, I would like to ask you about the changes with respect to university policies that have come into picture in the education policy with, for example, 4 years instead of a 3-year degree course.
Yeah. So there has been basically, if you'll analyze the policy which was earlier and which is proposed for future. So even in today's time at present, what used to happen is that if you want to complete a graduation, you have to study a particular subject for 3 years, right? But if in case there are some students who are not financially that stable, and due to some reasons or the other, after the second year, there may be due to some reasons they're not able to continue with their studies. But that 2 years now has gone into vain. They cannot ever continue the same studies. Keeping that into mind and various other aspects, now they have introduced that the graduation will go for 4 years. And it's not compulsory that you have to attend all the 4 years. So as soon as you complete the first year, you will be provided with a certificate. As soon as you complete the second year, you'll be provided with a diploma. And as soon as you complete third year, now you are eligible for any of the job interviews, or if any of the exams, for example, UPSC or the exams where the qualification or the requirement is that you should be a graduate. If you still want to continue your study in terms of research, that no, I want to study this subject because I really want to have more research in it, then you can go for the 4th year. And accordingly, the post-graduation has been managed. But the most important thing which has been introduced is the re-entry. So for example, if today a student runs out of money after the completion of the first year or second year, and now he cannot continue with his study, and after 3 to 4 years maybe he's again recovered with all the some money where he can come back and continue with the studies, he can rightly do so. Why? Because now the certificates have been divided per year. Similarly, the post graduation is something which has also been managed. So in today's time, if you want to do a master's, it is usually 1 or 2 years, and it has been same kept even in the proposed policy. So if you have in your undergraduation, if you have completed 4 years, where you have completed the first 3 years and you have also completed one more year as a form of research, then you'll only have to do 1 year of masters. However, if you have completed only the first 3 years because you were maybe planning at that period of time that I really want to go for a job interview or maybe an examination, and now you want to continue with your master, you can continue with the 2 year process. So maybe it is somehow giving the flexibility that the policy aims for. It is also increasing the employment level, maybe because there are many dropouts. So if you see the data which has been provided in the policy, there are many dropouts because we know how the financial conditions of people are in India, and somehow this will open up a way for them. And as soon as, and even because the policy also claims that they'll try to inbuilt all around 100% of the students in the first elementary stages and everything, so that this does not happen. So maybe I really believe that this will bring a definite good change for the policy. But still, what do you think for it?
So I completely agree that this is a very progressive step taken by the government, but it gives rise to one simple question: that considering that we have very limited seats in India with respect to universities or courses, and if people take an option of dropping out, for example, the prize Delhi University that a lot of people apply to every year, they have very limited seats, and all of those seats are usually filled because it has that kind of high demand. But if people want to either take the re-entry method, would the college infrastructure be able to support that in India? That is a question which has to be answered, because otherwise people have to opt for an open university route, which is often looked down upon in India because it does not have the same value of going to a university and attending, and that is something which is actually very disappointing. So what I see is required in this particular field is that even though you may give a provision for dropping out, a social change must come into picture, where it should be promoted that simply dropping out doesn't mean that you are not good enough, and dropping out and coming back in, that would create a problem. Another issue that comes up over here in this particular policy is that what is the level of understanding that the person still has. Although you may have a certification in, say, the first year and the second year, and you're not able to complete your third year, what is the amount of what is the kind of aptitude that you have, and what is the kind of uh, interest that you still have in pursuing such a course, and that plays a very important role in determining whether a person should be allowed to move into a very capital scarce and resource scarce educational system that India is currently relying on.
Yes. No, see, I agree with your point, and it's a very fair criticism that I agree with the point that if someone is coming back to the education system and the way the seats are defined, and it will be a ruckus. But I still believe that it's just a policy, right? Tomorrow it will be implemented and everything will take place. But as soon as we implement, it's an evolving process. So there will be changes. The committee will take this into recommendation. There will be many problems. But I still believe that the idea is perfectly fine. That how re-entry is something which is a major consideration for people at present of time, and how it should be implemented is something which is very debatable, and that's fair. That is totally something which I can understand.
All right, Yash. So, uh, understanding all of this and talking about criticisms, as
Yeah,
you just mentioned,
right.
the education policy, the national education policy, has also faced a lot of flank, despite also being flouted as one of the most progressive policies that the country has come out with. It has also faced a lot of flank.
Right.
So, what are these flanks, and what are your opinions on them?
Right. Okay. So there are many criticisms that are taking place in this framework. However, the first one seems to be a bit more economical. since the policy claims that at present the budget for education is close to 3%, and the policy claims that they're increasing it to 6%, which is absolutely the double of what we are having now. And since we all know the history of the present government with respect to economics and the finance industry and everything, so this is something which is highly being criticized, that we still don't know whether they will achieve the goal or not. If they achieve it, it's great, but what if they cannot? So this is something which is in criticism, as if it's a political statement or maybe just to deceive people and everything. The second comes that as soon as the language policy again comes into picture, that since regional language is something which is focused for the second stage, national language is focused on the third stage. So people do have an idea that maybe this will somehow create distance between the student and his or her understanding towards the language English. And as we already discussed, that how English is something which is very important for the future courses. But this is just a criticism that they believe will take place. The third and the sharpest criticism which we are having right now is the privatization of the higher education. So the idea is that at one place the policy talks about the flexibility that it is providing to students, the flexibility it is providing to the very institution. But when they are converting colleges into universities, the private players come into picture, and privatization is something which is really which one can assume that could take place. And this is something which is highly at present which has been criticized a lot. So these are some major criticism which have been there. On my opinion, I just believe that again it's just a policy, it is open for criticism. There are many works yet to do. The state and the central recommendation is yet left. The committee has given the policy, but the recommendations are still left, and there should be many discussions, and there should be space for amendments accordingly.
Okay. According to me, there's one very sharp criticism that I believe when it comes to the three language policy. So the point of which a lot of people argue is the language policy again. And the language policy says that the medium of education should be in the regional language to one extent. So the fact that a lot of cities, especially metros such as Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, see a lot of migrants. So these migrants sometimes often move from one city to another, and there's a lot of movement. People shift, because that is also a reality in our country, that people in lieu of opportunities move from one place to another. So when it comes to that, I believe it would be very difficult for a child to adopt from, say, one language to another, uh, even though English is a medium that they will be taught in, and they will be teaching in English as well. But the part of the regional language when they move from one place to another would be very difficult. So if a kid moves from Bangalore to, say, Mumbai, he would move from Kannada to Marathi, which would be very difficult for a child to adopt. And this is not a problem that is going to be faced by a very small group of people. There are a lot of laborers who also move from one place to another and also enroll their children in these schools. So
Right.
it will become very difficult for these people to seize quality options of education, because they would be very confused and they have to acclimatize. And some in many cases, before they acclimatize, they already moved to another town. So
Right.
that is another stark problem.
Right.
And commenting on the problem of privatization, uh, the debate whether education is a right or a industry is something that is ongoing even till today,
Right.
because the number of colleges that India has seen arise and the number of vacant seats that have also come into picture simply raise the question of simply bring out the fact that people are looking for quality, and they're not just simply looking for education. So I think so people answer that question of privatization and where to join
Right.
and how to join. But the fact that education is slowly becoming a business over something that is a right and something that is very moral
Right.
is a very real truth even today. So with that, Yash, I believe we have covered the national education policy to the extent of us being college students and how
Yes.
it would affect us and the immediate juniors or seniors
Yes.
who are there in our system. With that, I urge you guys to please subscribe as well as like our video. And This is an initiative that Yash and I have been plotting since for a very long time. And we finally came to a point where we recorded this and we have uploaded this particular video. I hope you find this very interesting, and I hope you support our initiative to put our opinions out there and put our understandings out there. And I am attaching our email ID in the description below, and we are willing to take all and any questions to answer to answer your doubts and queries regarding the policy. Again, we do not intend to take any sides or indulge in any sort of ideological wars. It is simply just putting our opinions out there and trying to understand what a particular issue is at hand through the eyes of us being simple graduate students trying to find a way on earth and trying to get a job at the end of the day, which I hope we do get a job. So, with that, thank you for watching, and we hope to see you soon.